Now, am I on? Yes, perfect. Hi. As mentioned, I'm from a company called 3D for Medical, and we essentially design applications for training in medical for medical students and for patients. What I'm talking today about is a new interface for healthcare and what that means. For us, it really means the patient interacting with the healthcare organization or with the health community. And that's something that tech really hasn't had a huge impact on. In a lot of other areas in healthcare, it has had a huge impact. In diagnosis, in procedures, yes. But when you talk about the doctor-patient relationship, that hasn't changed much in the last 100 years. And as a patient, we are not very health literate, I should say. Not very health literate at all. And that's even though for many, many years, a lot of us have been talking about patient education. And we've been talking about patient education and how it's so important. It's so important to empower the patient. And yet, it still isn't an integral part of the healthcare system. It's something that you go out and find yourself. It's not something that's prescribed or given to you. And that's an issue. Now, there's one area. There's one area that is being impacted by tech, and that's medical education. And that's something we know a lot about because we've been involved with it for many years. And so I think that's a good place to start, because what happens in medical education is having an impact on patient education. So let me show you a platform that is currently being used in medical schools around the world. Is that fine? Is there a reverb from that? No? No? This is a platform, Complete Anatomy. Complete Anatomy, I should say. Let me bring it up here. And I'm going to give you an idea, a taste of what a platform like this means as far as learning anatomy. So let me choose an item here, the zygomatic bone. I can now isolate that. I can choose to look at the parts. I can choose to look at the surfaces and explain. I can go back. I can fade it, so I can see how it interacts, its relationship with the other bones. All of this normally was in very 2D, very plain, very difficult to understand, and certainly contextualize medical textbooks. Now let me go and let me fade this as well. Let me bring in some nerves. Now suddenly you can see the nerves going through the bone. You understand the relationship with the teeth and the mandible. Now let me come down a bit further. Let me add some muscles. A couple of layers of muscles there. Now let me have a look at this muscle here. It is called the supraspinatus. The supraspinatus muscle, and I can find out some more about it. Let's have a look at the insertion origin. I can see where it's inserted and the origin of the muscle. Sorry, yeah, the origin and insertion. These are things that would normally have to have 3 or 4 textbooks lying out around the desk to have to jump in between them to understand where the insertion is. Next, I'll learn the physiology. How does that muscle work? Well, let's see how that muscle works. And this is being animated in real time. So I'm able to look at every muscle, see what it's doing and how it's doing it. I can fade all, so I can watch that muscle we were talking about, the supraspinatus, and see exactly what it's doing it and when it's doing it, because it changes color. I can then control it. with it's called abduction, so I've got 95%, 116%. I know exactly how much. Great for PT. Now, here's some nice new tools. These are tools that we demonstrated on stage with Apple in September. Let me add some more musculature. And let me go up here and use my pen here to choose the cut tool. And let me zoom in a little bit more. And let me cut here, and here, and here. And let me expose. Let me get rid of that. There we go. I'm actually cutting through the model in real time. Let me choose this nerve here. What is that? The sciatic nerve. We've all, I'm sure, had issues with our sciatic nerve. Now let's find out more about it. I can follow its path. I can highlight the origin of the path, or I can look at it against the skeleton and follow it back. Or I go back, and because I've cut the muscle, I can have a good look at the relationship between that muscle and that nerve, how close they are. Now let me go to a screener prepared here, which would be for the, let me come out of that. Let me get rid of the muscles here. And let me bring in another tool, a fracture tool. I am now, hold on, let me get rid of that. I am now going to add a fracture to this man's, it happens to be a male skeleton, to this man's neck of the femur. Bingo. And again, it adds it in real time to the actual model. There we go. There's the fracture. Now what else can we do with this model? Let me come back out of this. Let me come up and have a look at the skull. I can now record what I'm doing on this. So let me do that. I am going to use these tools here, and I'm going to make a circular cut in the head. Imagine in the old days you were nuts. This is what they do. They I think it was trypanning you, they called it, where they release the demons from your brain. There we go. I'm cutting through the different layers. I choose, let me get rid of that. Let me hide that. Let me look inside. Now, all the while, I'm being recorded. So let me stop that, save it. I'm going to call it head recording 222. Now that's being saved and it's being sent up to the cloud. And the beauty of this is that if I'm in a class, say I'm in Stanford University, where this is on the curriculum, and I'm doing a lesson, and I'm doing something that I want to share, or I'm the professor and I want to share it, this is what I do. I save it up to the cloud. It's automatically saved into whatever group I chose. It could be the whole class, it could be a subset, it could be public, it could be shared with everyone. Now, let me reset that, and let me go into recordings and find where I was, which was on the, let's go for latest, the recent. There we go. That's it. Now it's going to play that back. But this isn't a video. This is the beauty of this. It's not actually recording exactly what I've done. It's recording my voice, and it's recording the mathematics. So while that is playing, and you can't hear it, but there's a voiceover with it, in other words, exactly what I was saying, I can now stop that and interact with it. It's fully interactive. And when I finish interacting with it, I can press play again, and it goes back to exactly where it was and carries on playing. All right? We also have, actually, we've just released 2 days ago, in conjunction with a guy called Alan Detton, who's a professor of anatomy at Stanford, our courseware. We have a few example courses that are out there. We're going to be creating a whole course rubric, and that means that the whole of Anatomy 101 will be available. So you can choose it, you can choose, all your courses will be laid out like this. Also, you'll be able to create your own courses. It'll be a content sharing platform. And that's being rolled out in 24 universities in the US at the moment. So that's where we are with medical training. And that's been very successful. We have had 15 million downloads of our apps to date. And suddenly we realized something. With 15 million downloads, they can't all be medical students. So then we started getting in, through our customer services department, getting in emails And we suddenly realized, oh my goodness, doctors are buying this to educate their patients. And even more surprising, then patients were buying it to educate themselves. And that was to such an extent that there's now more patients buy it than doctors, and more patients buy it than medical students. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, as an example of this, we got an email from a Vietnam vet in Arizona who had been in and out of medical institutions, hospitals for years, with a whole list of medical complaints. The reason being he'd been exposed, long-term exposure to a chemical called Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. It was a deforestation agent used by the US military. And for many years, he struggled with being a victim in the actual process. And then he said, I'm going to read it out because he said, complete anatomy has been invaluable in helping me understand my conditions, but more importantly, it has given me the confidence to be able to discuss my many conditions with my doctors. And that was key for us, because he explained later on how he'd gone from being a victim to, now that he understood a little bit about it, he began to become part of the process. And that changed his life entirely. Now, it's not going to be the same for every patient because they're not that engaged with the medical world, but it changed his life entirely. And that is the power of patient education. It is patient empowerment. And while that is, there's a lot of health tech out there. I'm not saying that tech has not been involved in this process at all. I'm just saying it's not integrated. So while you have a huge amount of mobile apps that help to engage the patient as far as understanding or monitoring them, you have a huge amount of wearables that engage the patient in their own health, or patient portals that engage them with each other so they can find more treatment options. All that exists. It's just not integrated into the system. Let me give you an example. If we take wearables, from a show of hands, who here has ever bought a wearable, be it a Fitbit, a Misfit, or anything like that? All right, that's a pretty fair proportion of the audience. Now, how many of you still wear one? Okay, that's higher than normal, in fairness. Thanks for that. But let's say that's around 2/3 to a half. The issue normally there's not that many. You're a very healthy crowd. But the issue with a lot of these things is that even the majority don't get to see them ever. The minority go seek them out. They don't even stick with them long. They don't become sticky, as we say in software. And there's a reason for that. It's because they don't deliver on their promise. The idea they don't have real value, and they don't have real value is because they're not connected into the system. No one gives them real value. And that's interesting because that is how it is now, but it's not how it's going to be soon. Electronic health records and our ownership of them is going to be the sea change. It's going to be so difficult. And I know, I think Richard is going to be talking from HSE about health records later on and how important they are. And they are, because once they come into play, and imagine we've dialed forward a few years, and everyone in this room, in fact, everyone in this state, has their own electronic health record. And it's compatible with every other electronic health record in the world. Every bit of data you put into that, your wearables, all that data automatically sent into your electronic health record. Your heart rate and your blood pressure is monitored 24/7, which is much better, and uploaded instantaneously to your electronic health record. Devices, like you can go into a pharmacy, and there's a little device there. You put your finger in, it takes a tiny prick, analyzes your blood, and sends that 3 minutes later to your electronic health record. And that's not a million miles away. It's been in production for 8 years and in testing. It's about 2-3 years away from release. All of that information gathered together in your electronic health record, now it has value. Now all that data has value. Because you can take that, go to via some telemedicine site to a doctor in Korea who's brilliant in this area, or in New York, and have them diagnose based on your data, based on this huge amount of data. Or, more importantly, you could have diagnostic algorithms that you subscribe to that automatically highlight things like, oh, your glucose level has been high for 6 months, you should see someone about diabetes. Or could be warning you of future things. You know, if you carry on like this, you won't make 40, as my mother said. Well, I'm 50, so joke's on you. And also, it could highlight areas of weakness in your data, saying you don't have enough blood analysis for the last 6 months. Go get some. That's where it has real value, but we're not there yet. In fact, and I know we're saying we're a long way from it, but we're not too far from it. Once those health records come in, that data suddenly has value. But how do we make sure that the patient becomes health literate, is engaged in the process? Because that's not happening at the moment. So how do we do that? Well, or give me an example, Robert, I hear you ask. Well, as luck would have it, I have an example here. And this is back again to the consultant, the patient consultant, the beginning of that healthcare journey. What happens? And this is called our clinical solution. And this is a point-of-care orthopedic patient education tool. So imagine you've got a dodgy knee, you've had a scan, it turns out you've got a medial peripheral tear of the meniscus, whatever that is. So you've come in to see me, a world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, and I've showed you this. Wow, we started already. Amazing. Look at that. I can now skip to exactly the area of concern, the menisci. I can bring in the image that was used to diagnose, and I can now explain that to you. Let me bring that up here. So what I do is, I choose my annotation tool, I highlight this area here, that shading, that is here, and it's a scan through here. And what does that look like in real life? Well, let's take the cut tool, and let's cut through it. That's what the cut looks like. I've actually cut through, if you remember in the previous platform we were able to do that, we can do it here as well. I can now move straight to pathology. And because it's intelligent software, it automatically knows what I've been doing in the last screen. So that's actually my injury here. Or your injury, I beg your pardon. I'm the doctor. So I bring it along to the area that concerns me, which is here. And I'm going to highlight this area here, that redness. And I'm writing like a consultant as well. That redness there means because it's on the peripheral edge of the meniscus, there's blood supply, so it can be repaired. And let me go to the procedure. This is what I'm going to do to you. Instead of having to cut it away, like I normally would, I can actually repair it. And that's what this looks like. It's stitched. So let me stop it there and highlight that. And that's a big difference, because if I had a cut here, I'd have to cut it away, debride it. I'd get rid of it. You'd never have it again. Because it's on the peripheral edge, it can be repaired, and you can be as good as new. A useful piece of learning. I now go to the summary, and I can highlight what I want to keep. It automatically takes screenshots, all the animations that were there. We're also partnered with the Mayo Clinic, which is no small feat. They're quite exacting in who they deal with. For the preview text, I can look and see what sort of text I'm sent. This is to make sure that I don't go to Dr. Google. And I send this to the patient, and I'm going to send this to me. And off it goes on a wing and a prayer, as long as yes, the Wi-Fi worked. So it's headed off to my phone, if that comes up. There we go. So I go into my Gmail. There it is. Now, it's got a code because it's a HIPAA-compliant secure server. I take that code, I go into the consultation, I paste that in carefully, there we go. I accept the agreements. And for some reason it's not letting me in. It's so compliant, it's not recognizing me in this location. So you have to take my word for it. What will have appeared will be all those screenshots that were taken. I don't want to see all that. All those screenshots that were taken will appear. All the animations that were there with voiceovers in full will be there for you to view at any time. All the data from the Mayo Clinic, updated regularly, is all there. So instead of a consultation, that 6 or 7 minute consultation with your consultant being lost, or most of it lost in an hour and all of it lost in one day, it's now an asset. It's an asset that follows you all the way through the healthcare pathway. It can be viewed by you as many times as you want, or shared with family and friends. And that's That's where we first start engaging them. And that's where you start. That's where you get health literate. Now, to do that, it's not that easy. If we relied purely on consultants, it's not going to happen because they're just not going to do it. Of course, it saves them time and money, and they'll be keen to do it. But they're not the drivers. It's either top-down or bottom-up. Top-down, legislative, like in the US, with meaningful use stage 3, or using organizations, national health organizations like the NHS or the HSE, or it's bottom-up. And that comes from people choosing to go to a particular surgeon because of his outcomes ratings, or because of the way he educates his patients. But it's going to happen. No matter what we do, it's going to happen. And how far it happens, that's the question. There's a great book by a guy called Eric Topol. And instead of, nowadays we talk about the doctor will see you now. The title of his book about patient empowerment is The Patient Will See You Now. And that's probably as far as it could go, but it probably won't go that far. But it's going to change, and it's going to change fast. Thank you very much.
So, thanks very much. We're just wondering if you'd like to take a few Q&As.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, having had him up, we have a mic that's going around. If anyone would like to ask any questions. And I guess, right, so while we were waiting for questions, it's, I guess, how quickly do you think it will progress?
I'll tell you what, the change will be the health record. Once everyone has their own health record and they're used to being able to go on and add data to it and own it, that's when things will change. Because everyone in this room has a medical record. But I doubt very few of you have ever actually seen it. And that's unusual. It's such a personal and valuable data that's what's so unusual. What's surprising is we haven't taken ownership of it already. Once we have ownership of it, once we have our own electronic health record, then I think all these other things are going to roll really quickly. But also, of course, I mentioned you have to be health literate. So there is going to have to be a learning curve for people when they suddenly see this electronic health record. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean when I go to my physician and he says, no longer are people accepting, oh, you've got a bad knee, I'm going to replace it. They want to know a bit more detail. They want to know, what are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? Is there an alternative?
Okay. So and then another question would be is that sometimes the data helps to drive changes in behavior. So would you agree with that? And are you optimistic about it?
Of course. I mean, it's not, are we there? It's not, data doesn't always, I mean, I've had a misfit and a jawbone to help lose weight, and it hasn't helped a huge amount. So yeah, sure, it does drive, but realistically, that's not everything. I do think, though, when you have an electronic health record and you see everything laid out in front of you in a dashboard type of way, and you imagine that you suddenly can gear, oh, my blood level or my cholesterol level has been going up steadily for 2.5 years. That can have a great impact. Much more of an impact than going into your doctor and he says, oh, it's high. And maybe sometimes not even telling you how high it is, just it's high. But if you can follow that and you suddenly go, oh my God, yes. And we all love being able to take that and make it go down. So if you can see that in real time, actually coming down, that's more of a motivator. You don't have to wait until 6 months' time and you see your doctor again and he says, oh, it's gone down. You go to your chemist every 3 weeks, you get your blood test, and you see it coming down yourself. That's a strong motivator.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have a question here. Can you give him the mic, please?
Hello. So your health data is your own, and where is it going to be hosted, the electronic health record, that you can access it, and the physicians that you nominate should be able to access it, can access it?
Well, remember, this isn't our electronic health record.
No,
These
I know.
will be held, yes. Where is it held? Well, that's a good question, because if it's held by a national health organization, that's fine, and everyone has their own unique number. But what happens when it's a private company that has it? And for there's a lot of them out there, Epic, Cerner, all of these are big electronic health record companies. And they're making a lot of money right now because it's a legal requirement in the US. They have to. And they're ugly things. They really are. So, and also there's not a huge amount of patient interaction with them because they're so ugly and they haven't concentrated on the patient. That's not where the legislation is telling them to be. So as far as, at the moment, what they're doing with those electronic health records in the States is they are getting the same train tracks. There's a level of compatibility that they have to have along each of the meaningful use stages, stage 1, 2, and 3. And once that compatibility is of a certain level, that you can switch your electronic health record from one company to the next, that's much more powerful. At the moment, you're kind of tied into the same one. So the hospital you're with might be using Epic. You're tied in with Epic as an electronic health record, and you can't move it to Cerner if you want to move somewhere else. That limits you. Once they become so fluid and they have global compatibility, then it's your record. Then you decide where you want to go with it. You decide, not only is it held, let's say, in Epic in Mount Sinai hospital, but you might decide, oh yes, I want to send that same record to a hospital in Poland that is very good at diagnosing whatever. And you can. And that'd be great. That's when it suddenly becomes yours. And that's when that compatibility. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer the question.
Okay.
To an extent.
Because I think you were asking, because you were asking about the security of that.
No, I was also asking about the who pays? Who's going to pay for your record to be held and transferred?
Yes.
And
now, when you don't have, ideally, it's in places where you've got the NHS. It's obviously the NHS, but in the US, it's the hospital. That's why it's difficult to get ownership away from them, because they own it. You don't own it. But there should be legislation that you have to own it. Because the big issue they're having is the doctor-patient ratio. That's growing and growing. And everyone in the future, whether it's ours or the generation beneath us, will have to own their data. Because less and less time can be spent with the doctor. They have to find ways of minimizing their exposure to patients to allow them to see more at the same time. So we will have to have ownership of it. And how that happens, is that because it's legislated? I don't know, but at the moment, yes, it is owned primarily by those organizations, the Epics or the hospitals or whoever they are.
Okay, thanks very much. That's great. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it. Cheers.
coming up.